You know what's funny? The My Hero Academia world seems to have every quirk you can think of, ranging from fire, ice, lightning, wind, and even a stone quirk. But I always wondered, where's the sand quirk? I mean, seriously, in every single shonen anime you can think of, you cannot tell me a single sand user that isn't tough. Crocodile, Gaara, Scorpion, and even the legend himself, Sandman. So today, ladies and gentlemen, we're here to rectify all of that by giving Deku not only an insanely busted sand quirk, but we're also going to be giving him an incredibly powerful tailed beast to go along with that. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, grab your snacks, grab your popcorn, turn on that noti bell so you don't miss the next two parts, and enjoy. Hey Deku, me and the guys have been wondering, what's your quirk? You might as well tell us already, Izuku. Or what? Are you quirkless? Because a lot of people have been thinking that, and a couple of rumors have been spreading. Are they true? Are you really as useless as they're saying? Izuku would look up towards the direction of Bakugo, not saying a word, just looking at him, and it's almost as if his eyes were saying a million things all at once. Bakugo, realizing this, would think to himself that maybe he should leave him alone, but his lackeys were already laughing, and he was already 1 foot deep in, so he might as well just go full throttle. Right after that would happen, Bakugo would grab the toy that Izuku was playing in the sandbox, and he would throw it across the ground, as he would go on to tell Deku that he can have that back when he gives them their answer. And so Izuku, seeing this, would just go on to realize that Bakugo's not going to be leaving him alone, and so he would just stay quiet and walk away. But Bakugo would say, "Guess I gotta teach you some manners, Deku," before then charging a small explosion in his hand and throwing it towards the direction of Deku. But before it could even hit him, the sand in the sandbox would proceed to create a shield around Izuku, as Bakugo would be like, "What the? He has a sand quirk? What the heck?" As Deku would just continue walking away, and Bakugo would say, "I'm not done with you. You're not going anywhere, Deku." As from here, Izuku would just walk off, literally not paying any mind to Bakugo, because the Izuku that we get in this timeline has lived through a rough life. Like, he's gonna be having a personality that mimics Gaara, because when Izuku was born, his mom literally died giving birth to him, which, it's really nobody's fault. Sometimes that happens, and it's just an unfortunate reality of the world we live in. And number 2, when Izuku was young, at about the age of like 6 years old, he lost his father. What made it hurt most is the fact that he grew close to him, because his dad only had Izuku, and Izuku only had his father. But losing him to a pro hero accident, that made it 10 times worse. And Izuku vowed that he was going to become a hero so that stuff like that didn't happen. He was going to make sure that reckless heroes weren't going to be taking the lives of other people anytime soon. The moment that he becomes a hero, he's going to be changing everything. But he doesn't exactly desire to be a hero in the limelight. If anything, Izuku's favorite heroes are the ones that stay underground, the ones that do night patrols, the ones that just get in and get out. People like All Might, they don't really pique his interest. Although he will admit that All Might is pretty cool, and he's the one exception to his rule. He kinda thinks that he's a pretty good hero after all. So Izuku in this specific timeline, because he doesn't have a mom and a dad, this means that he needs somewhere to stay. So he's going to be staying at an orphanage. And so Izuku, because he's staying at an orphanage, would kind of just like keep to himself. There'd be like the groups in the orphanage where like they hang out with each other, and like it's like the most powerful quirk kids. They usually are the ones that get adopted. But because Izuku has a quirk that he doesn't show off, everyone kind of just thinks he's quirkless. A lot of people do, except for Bakugo and his lackeys, which have chosen not to mess with him, but Bakugo makes it a point to want to mess with him whenever he can. Izuku has done one thing that's kind of interesting for him. Inside of his backpack that he takes to school, there's literally sand inside of it. Kind of like Gaara has his like sand gourd, his gourd. Is that how it's said? Sand gourd? I'm not sure. But kind of like how Gaara has his own thing that he keeps his sand in, Izuku's going to be having like a backpack where he has his like books and stuff like that organized neatly. And to make sure that the sand doesn't get in his papers, he uses his powers to make sure that that doesn't affect him. Okay. This is the point of the story where I have to explain. Izuku was born with a sand manipulation quirk, and unlike in the original timeline where, of Naruto obviously, where Gaara's mother imbued the sand with chakra and he has Shukaku and all these things to have all of these powers, Izuku is going to be having Shukaku, but not in the sense that he's going to be having the evil one. He's sort of going to be having like Shukaku as the one that we get in the Boruto, just because like I don't want this dude to become a villain, right? And because he doesn't have his mom and his dad, I figured he might as well toss this version of Deku at least one bone and give him Shukaku, who's going to be helping him out in life and making sure that Izuku's not too alone and he doesn't feel like he has to become a villain or something like that. So he would have Shukaku, but he wouldn't be able to interact with him as much because there's sort of like a period where Shukaku's chakra is sort of manifesting and turning into a full-fledged tailed beast inside of him, and so Izuku would barely understand that Shukaku's within him when he gets to around the age of 10. Izuku's sand quirk would have just been a given due to, you know, kind of the reincarnation aspect that we like to use with these stories, but also I could just say that it's a quirk, you know what I mean, like in realistic terms, but I did want to give him Shukaku, so we are going to be giving him access to things like wall walking and like walking on water and stuff like that, just because like A, it's cool, and B, why not? Also, I've never specifically seen Gaara use like fire style or water style or none of that other stuff, so we're just going to be sticking to sand. Like, I'm not going to be giving him any of those things. He's also not going to be like a shuriken user or kunai user. He's strictly just going to be a sand hero. And I mean, if we're being honest, it's going to be pretty effective. There is kind of sand literally everywhere in this world, right? But regardless, as Izuku would grow up during the years, nobody would really end up adopting him, and it would eventually just get to a point where Izuku would go from orphanage house to orphanage house, and he would just keep to himself, stay quiet, with there being a couple of traumatic houses, which would lead Izuku to realize that he also, in becoming a hero, he's gonna need to make sure that stuff like this doesn't happen to other kids who can't defend themselves. Not that Deku ever has defended himself, because he can if things get too bad, but things have never gotten that bad. But Deku has just sort of realized that the world is not as peachy and roses as everybody else seems to think it is. At least, like everybody else, like Bakugo thinks it at least. And so, Deku, because of all of these quick realizations that he has at a young age, he would just mature at such a rapid pace that it's not even funny. While every other kid is like fantasizing about being a hero, Deku's not looking at it as some sort of like dumb play thing. He's looking at it from the serious consequences of him becoming a hero, him being out there, and if he messes up, lives will be lost. Deku's not looking at this like a game. He's taking this as real life. And because of that, Deku's grades would be phenomenal. He's always at the top of his class, and he would keep up with extreme levels of training. Deku's physical strength would be off the charts crazy, like a little under Stain's levels, obviously, because he's not exactly super powerful in that sense, but his sand control, it's just off the charts. If Izuku truly wanted to, he could create like a sand golem or a sand dragon that would just shoot at you, or sand hands that would like grip you and squeeze you, causing all of your blood to just squirt everywhere. He also has Gaara's perfect defense and many of the things that make Gaara just an imposing, powerful beast. So Deku, he's kind of cool. Regardless though, like I said, over the years, Bakugo would definitely try to bully Deku, messing with him whenever he can, but Deku just always ignores him. Eventually, the day of the first episode of My Hero Academia would come around, and with this day would pretty much come the situation where the villain would mug some people. So, with Izuku seeing this whole thing go down, Izuku understanding that there's definitely ways that he could handle the situation without showing who exactly is doing it, would just kind of like put his hands inside of his hoodie pocket, because he'd be wearing a hood this day much like many other days. I mean, like, this dude literally wears hoodie even when it's hot, you know, like he's one of those guys. Not gonna lie, that was kind of me in high school, but you know, that's besides the point. Anyways, Deku would like begin moving his hands inside of his like hoodie pockets as sand from the ground would begin to accumulate, and two gigantic arms would sprout out from the ground, grabbing onto this villain as it just holds him in place, hardening the sand as Deku would just walk away, acting like nothing happened. And everybody watching would be like, who did that? Who did that? Who used their quirk? Pro heroes around would be like, whose quirk is that? And Deku would just fade into the shadows, not really caring. Eventually, he makes his way to his classroom, and finally, when the teacher would walk in, he would say, "Alright class, I'm going to be giving out career aptitude tests. Go ahead and fill these out to your best abilities and see what you guys are going to do in the future." But as he would say that, he would finally begin to chuckle, not being able to do it seriously with a straight face, as he would say, "Who am I kidding? I know you all want to become heroes!" Throwing the papers off into the air as everybody begins to use their quirks. Everyone but Deku, because like I said, It's not a game. But as Bakugo seeing this, he'd be like, huh, don't lump me in with these D-listers, teach. These guys would be lucky to even be sidekicks to some busted hero. As from here, after hearing that, he would say, huh, Bakugo, don't you want to go to the national school, UA? And Bakugo would say, yeah, and that's where my tale's gonna start. I'm gonna become rich and famous. I'm gonna be the best hero around. As he would suddenly then go on to say, oh yeah, Midoriya, you also want to go to the national school as well, don't you? Bakugo, after hearing this, would turn towards the direction of Izuku, gritting his teeth and throwing an explosion at the desk, leading Izuku to be sent flying from his desk onto the ground. As he would land there, not saying a thing, just kind of like sitting there and looking at Bakugo with a dead-eyed expression. Bakugo from here would go on to tell Izuku, what, he's not gonna do anything about it? He always knew he was a loser. And the teacher would say, settle down, Bakugo, leave Izuku alone. He likes to keep to himself. Let's let things stay like that. And some of the kids in the class would be like, yeah, he should leave him alone. He has a powerful quirk. I don't know why he doesn't fight back. And as all this would be happening, we would just hear Shukaku in the background going, hey kid, go, you use your quirk. Use something. Send that boy out the window. Use your sand to send him crashing out there or crush him. Crush him with a fist. Make his blood splatter everywhere. Come on, kill the kid. He just disrespected you in front of everybody. And Deku internally would think, shut up, Shukaku. I'm not about to kill him for some senseless bullying. Is he an idiot and do I want to beat him up sometimes? Yeah, but I'm not going to take it there. At the end of the day, if he's not hurting anyone else, I don't really care. And so he would get up, not looking at Bakugo, and just sit back down, putting his desk where it goes, as Bakugo would say, at least he knows his place. He's been knowing it ever since that day. Only time he ever managed to sort of, stand up to me. As Deku, from this moment, would just make his way towards his house, never even encountering the sludge villain, which would mean one of two things. Either the sludge villain gets away, which is a definite possibility, or All Might captures the sludge villain, turns him into the police station, and we don't get the situation with Bakugo, the sludge villain, Midoriya, or All Might taking place. And so we're now able to just focus on the following next 10 months leading to the UA entrance exam, and during those 10 months, Deku would train intensely. Not only would Izuku rely on his sand because he knows that people like Aizawa are out there who can eliminate quirks, so Izuku would definitely look into learning some sort of taijutsu, a fighting style. And we could just say that his hand-to-hand combat abilities aren't going to be insanely through the roofs, but they're competent. Like he can handle his own if he doesn't have access to his quirk. And so that's exactly what Deku would do, because when it comes to his sand quirk, Deku kind of has things all figured out and settled in. Shukaku would show him a couple of things, and Shukaku would even ask to come out fully, but Deku would never really let that happen, and Izuku knows that if he ever does need more extra power, he can always tap into Shukaku's one-tailed state, where parts of Shukaku would begin showing physically on Izuku, much like when Gaara transformed into the partial one-tailed state facing off against Sasuke and in turn Naruto in the forest. So after this would take place, actually speaking of Naruto, if this video came out when I'm thinking it's going to come out, this means that on this same day, I'm actually also going to be dropping a Naruto What If, which is going to be, what if Naruto was Bardock's reincarnation? So if you guys watched that, definitely go check it out. I think I popped off with that one, I'm not going to lie. It's going to be having a little bit more storytelling at the beginning than usual, just because I scripted it. And then this one, I'm not going to lie to y'all, I didn't script it at all. I just sat down because it's like halftime during the Warriors game right now. And I'm just like, I'm really hoping that these dudes win and pull through somehow, because right now they're still down a couple of points. But anyways, I digress. I'm over here rambling. You guys came for a what if, not for me to talk about basketball or other videos that I'm making. Well, technically not. But anyways, moving on. Eventually the 10 months would finally be over, and we would finally see Izuku taking the entrance exam. The written portion, nothing really happens there, and Izuku wouldn't run into Uraraka like he does in the original, because again, he's not exactly this like a mumbling kid who like is super nervous and stuff like that, so that doesn't take place. He also doesn't mumble inside, meaning no Ida situation, and when he would finally make his way outside, he doesn't bother to go towards Uraraka, so that Ida interaction doesn't even happen either. As soon as President Mike tells them all to go, Izuku would instantly proceed to use his sand to essentially create two gigantic arms and throw himself straight towards the direction of a bunch of robots. Izuku in this moment causes a bunch of like sand to grow up into the air as he would catch himself, and he would create like little landing spots for him to put his feet on, similar to what the microbots do in Big Hero 6, where he creates like footholds for himself out of sands. And he would then look towards one of the directions of the robots before holding one hand out, and from the ground a bunch of like little like sand minions would come out, which would begin to beat on these robots. Izuku creates like 100 of them out of sand, and a couple of like Izuku clones would come in out of nowhere, as you know, they just start decimating everything around, with all the pro heroes being like, what the heck? This kid has a sand quirk, he can create clones of himself, and he has such perfect manipulation. How is this even possible? Some of them would be thinking, but Nezu would think to himself, impressive, I wonder what he'll do with this, as he would then go on to pretty much summon the Zero Pointer, and Izuku, seeing that, would just look up bored before all of his clones and all of the little like things would just like collect into one specific being, turning into like this gigantic Sandman like creature. Like, have you guys seen Spider-Man 3? That's what happens. This Sandman thing would proceed to then instantly punch the Zero Pointer, sending it crashing onto the ground, as Izuku would use his sand to make sure that the collateral damage is pretty much kept to zero, dropping the Zero Pointer in a location where it literally destroyed nothing. And Nezu, seeing this, would be stunned. Not only was he willing to show off a little bit to show that he's powerful, but he was willing to show that he has awareness of everything that's going down. He's not going to defeat a villain in such a rash way that other civilians get damaged or anything. And Nezu is loving the display of power from this kid. Genuinely, he's impressed. And so right after the test would be over, Izuku would just walk off, not really stopping for anybody who's shocked and looking at him, because mind you, Izuku practically took all the robots out to the point where the other examinees that were there with him, they had to go take the entrance exam the next day because there was not enough robots for them to show off what they could really do. So everybody else would be tasked with, figuring out their abilities the next day, and Izuku would just be at home when finally his letter would come in, his acceptance letter from UA, as his adoptive parents for now that he would be at would open the letter and see the message for themselves, as they would realize this kid that doesn't speak is this strong? They're like, kid, come here right now. And Izuku would come down from his room, headphones in tow, as they ask him if this is really true, he really got into the school. Izuku would go on to say that he did, what of it? And they would say that this is great. With this, they could finally make it out of this situation. They can have money. They can finally stop struggling and adopting these useless orphans to make it by. And Izuku, hearing that, would just get extremely angered by that, but just stay quiet. As Shukaku would say, yeah, you should just kill those guys. Kill them now. No one's gonna know, and no one's gonna miss them. Create clones to make it look like they got injured somewhere else. Come on, Izuku, just do that. But ultimately, Izuku, after hearing that, would just kind of have a scowl on his face and say, Shukaku, I'm trying to become a hero. His adoptive parents hearing this would be like, what? Who's Shukaku? As Izuku would say, don't worry about it. Look, I'm gonna become a pro hero. And not only am I gonna become a pro hero, but I'm almost positive I'm gonna be a top 10 at least. Look, if I can promise you guys a load of money, will you promise me to start treating the rest of the kids fairly, giving them better food, and making sure that you stay out of my way? The parents instantly just looked at him and they were like, we could do that right now. In fact, I'll go grocery shopping. Just promise that fat stack of cash when you become a hero, okay? And Izuku would say, I promise. As they'd say, so what's your quirk anyways? As Izuku would show them that he has sand manipulation, and from all the little crevices in the house where little dust would formulate, Izuku would create a little flower in front of his hand, as they would all be stunned like there was a literal sand flower. This dude's over here doing Patrick things, creating things out of sand, And Izuku would then make his way back towards his room, as he would just ignore everything, cranking up some loud rock and roll music, as finally Izuku would make his way towards UA when the first day would finally come around, and Izuku now finally can make his way towards the beginning of his journey to become a pro hero. Izuku enters the classroom, immediately noticing that Aizawa was their homeroom teacher. Izuku would crack a slight smile before sitting down on the desk, putting his headphones on, and Uraraka would go over to him asking him how in the world he was able to do all that during the entrance exam. But Izuku looks at her, responds a little bit, a couple of times, a little dryly actually, and then proceeds to signal towards Aizawa saying that he thinks class is going to start soon. So Aizawa would get up, everybody would stay quiet, and he would go on to tell them to meet him outside where they're going to be taking the Quirk apprehension test. Everybody would do just that, making their way outside, not making Aizawa wait at all, as Aizawa from here would go on to toss the ball towards Izuku, who actually broke Uehai's record for his robot points and rescue. No rescue points because he didn't rescue anybody, but robot points, as Izuku would just proceed to create a contraption out of sand that would launch the ball as far as he could possibly go. Did he get the most impressive scores in the universe? Not really. In fact, he got lower scores than Bakugo, and this would lead Bakugo to be like, I knew it. Your Quirk isn't all that special. You just got lucky with the robot portion. As Bakugo goes up next, throwing the ball extremely far and smirking, before then Uraraka would throw hers to infinity, and Bakugo would be like, she just got lucky. As from here, we would have the rest of the tests, and Izuku would actually do very, very well on all of them. All of the tests that he could actually use his sand ability on, he would pretty much get towards the top, and the rest of them he would stay towards the top as well actually, because his physical abilities are they're just that good straight up. So after all this would be said and done, a couple of people would go over towards Izuku saying that his Quirk is awesome. They haven't seen a Quirk like that ever since they would bring up Cementos, that he has a Quirk similar because he uses cement and Deku uses sand, and Izuku says, they're really different, that. As, from here Shukaku would be going in his head, hey look, you're finally gonna have friends, aren't you? Now you're in high school, you have no choice but to interact with these kids. As Izuku angrily would be like, that doesn't mean I have to befriend them. And so Izuku would make his way out of there, just being like, I don't have time for this. And so he would make his way home, where he would think to himself, I wonder when part 2 is coming out. Alright, we immediately pick up our story right where I had left off yesterday. Izuku would finally make his way home, and the second that he opens the door, he realizes that for one of the first times in forever, the fridge is actually full of snacks, and it's pretty good. His brothers and sisters, adoptive brothers and sisters obviously, are enjoying themselves, and it looks like they're not as scared of their parents. They're being a lot more lenient, and because of that, this translates to the kids doing a lot more housework around the house, with them actually being able to enjoy the TV every now and then, and Izuku having a smile on his face seeing that just that one little change of him showing the parents that one day they're going to be compensated for just treating the kids like they should be treated. Izuku would smile knowing that he is already a hero before even getting his license. And so Izuku would make his way to his room after grabbing a small snack from the kitchen and begin to go to sleep, as once he does so, he would finally wake up and see Shukaku. And he would be like, what do you want this time? Can't you just let me take a nap in peace? And Shukaku would say, you think I'm gonna let you take a nap after that embarrassing performance? You let people talk however they want to you. You don't show off as much as you should, and you're still letting those dumb adoptive parents of yours continue to breathe. I say you just take over this world and make everyone have to live a happy life. Guess Madara had the right idea. As from here, Izuku would say, okay, 1, I'm not gonna do that, and 2, who's Madara? I'm tired of you always doing this to me, Shukaku. It's so annoying, he would say, as Shukaku would say, but you love it, don't you, kid? As Izuku would just finally be like, whatever, and would walk away towards the void before just kind of closing his eyes and finally getting into a deep sleep state. From here, we would finally cut to Izuku making his way towards the class the very next day, and when Izuku would do so, he would actually end up bumping into Jiro, who, seeing him, would be like, sorry about that, and Izuku would say, it's really no problem. Opening the door for her, she would walk in, and both of them would look at each other, kind of acknowledging that they don't have to address whatever just happened out there since nothing did happen, and they kind of just ignore each other. From here, Izuku would just sit down as Aizawa goes on to explain that they're going to be needing to have these permission slips signed off by their parents or guardians to say whether, they're able to actually go to the USJ or not. And so Izuku, after hearing that, would be like, alright, sounds good, asking when exactly this little USJ event's gonna happen, as Aizawa would say that it's gonna be taking place 1 week from now. As Izuku would say that's great, and suddenly Aizawa would say, oh, and one more thing. But before he could even finish his sentence, you would just see All Might busting through the door being like, I am here! As Aizawa would say, All Might's gonna be your teacher. As everybody in the classroom instantly starts start getting super excited, and Izuku has a lot of respect for All Might, but he's not a fanboy like the one that we have in the original. Like I said, this Deku, very different than the one that we're accustomed to, and not gonna lie, I'm having a bit of fun recording this version of Izuku. Speaking of recording, I might even record the second part to the Bardock Naruto video, which, you know, if you guys go on to finish this video, then go check out my part 1 for Bardock, and maybe part 2 will already be out. Typically, I'm going to do like 1 hour space between them, so you guys have time to watch one and then the other. So yeah, anyways. But continuing forward with the story, after that would take place, All Might would go on to reveal to the students where their hero costumes are, and after that would happen, everybody just gets changed into them, meeting All Might outside where ballots would be drawn to see who exactly the teams would be. Izuku would actually get pretty lucky being teamed up with Jiro, because she's actually going to be able to do some things with her quirk, and so the second that would happen, Izuku would, you know, just look over to her and just like kind of nod. She nods at him, and Izuku doesn't say anything towards her. Like, if you guys are thinking that Izuku and her are about to have some romantic relationship right now, no. They're kind of just like not getting in each other's way and just kind of like staying quiet. Like, Izuku's glad that he got paired up with her because she's not obnoxious, she's not loud, and he doesn't have to deal with Shukaku saying kill her in his ear, you know? Because Shukaku, instead of saying that, is saying, hey, look, you're finally gonna be in close quarters with a girl, aren't you nervous? As Izuku would say, shut up, Shukaku. And so we would pretty much just get a scene in which he and Jiro both walk into the room, as Izuku would actually be paired up against Katsuki Bakugo and Tenya Ida, like he is originally. What would take place after this is Jiro would place her earphone jack straight into the ground, saying that someone's approaching them fast, as Izuku would have actually already known that, seeing as sand would be throughout the entire building and little eyeballs would appear, as they can track Bakugo's movements. The second that Bakugo would turn the corner, there would be like a gigantic sand ball that would come flying at him, causing Bakugo to have a bunch of sand going in his hair and in his costume, pissing Bakugo off greatly, as Izuku would just have a slight smirk on his face and say that finally he can pay Bakugo back for all those times. As Shukaku would say, yeah, dang right you will. What are you gonna do, trap him in a sand coffin, crush him to death, use sand spikes to kill him? And Deku would say, no, I'm not gonna do all of that, I'm just gonna beat him up. As Shukaku would be like, you're lame. Gaara would have done so much more than that. And Izuku would say, well, I'm not Gaara, am I? Shukaku would say, guess you're not. At least you have a better haircut than him. Shots fired. But anyways, Izuku from here would go on to use his sand quirk to proceed to grab both of Bakugo's arms, pretty much causing him to be completely immobile, as Izuku would step closer and some sort of sadistic side of him would come out that he hasn't unleashed ever, as Izuku would smirk and say, you know, Bakugo, just because I never fought back against you doesn't mean that I couldn't. As he would proceed to punch Bakugo square in the gut, and then after that he would smile, as Bakugo would be like, damn it, Deku. And from here, Deku would punch him in the face, as this would cause Bakugo to spit out some blood, as Bakugo shoots explosions over and over, causing the sand to like weaken a bit, as he holds one gauntlet in front of him and shoots the explosion, not from the gauntlet but from his hand, at Izuku's face. This would cause some pieces of sand to fall off of Izuku's face, as it would be revealed that Izuku had sand armor. And from here, Izuku would proceed to cover Bakugo up in sand from the neck down, as Bakugo, trapped inside of it and unable to move, would begin to slowly feel his entire body being squeezed, as Shukaku would say, good. And from here, Izuku would be like, what am I doing? As he would proceed to let Bakugo go and just use a gigantic like sand fist to punch him into the wall, knocking him out, as Izuku would ask Shukaku if he had something to do with that. Shukaku saying he wasn't gonna kill him anyways, as Izuku would get extremely upset with Shukaku saying that he's not a killer, as Shukaku would say, and that's the problem, some people need to be killed. As Izuku would say, that dude's gonna be a hero one day, and whether I like it or not, he's gonna save multiple lives. As he would go off to make his way towards where Tenya Ida is, and seeing that Jiro was right next to him, Izuku would say, why don't you take this one? Jiro would slam both of her hands onto the ground, as she would then use her heartbeat to shoot an attack straight towards the direction of Ida, who would actually, being affected by this, would fall onto one knee, as Izuku quickly proceeds to form a wall in front of Ida and themselves, as he would slowly walk towards the bomb, placing his hand on it, as All Might would say, hero team wins! And after that would take place, Izuku would just say, finally I can go home. He would do so, and everybody would kind of like try, first everybody would try to like be like, oh, you're so great, you're so cool, like I can't believe your quirk is so awesome. And Bakugo at this moment would be pissed. He's like, bro, like never again will I be embarrassed like this. So he would like shoulder check Deku and be like, sorry about that, nerd. As you know, Deku would just make his way home, ignoring that, being like, you know, I kind of deserve that after what I did to him. So he would make his way home, and eventually about a week would take place. Since, you know, the permission slips would be handed out, Deku obviously gets it signed by his parent and guardians because it's like they want the money that's going to come from him being a hero. And Izuku would say that so far everything's looking good. Nobody there at that school stronger than him. As you know, his parents would be like, good, make sure you become a top 10 hero and give us a big house. They're already showing him pictures of the houses they want. And Izuku would be like, look, continue treating the kids the way that you are now, and I promise I'll make that happen. Just don't go back to your old ways. And also, you don't have to do all that crazy stuff for them. Just be decent parents. And they would both like smile, like having fake smiles after hearing that, like actually being angry, but just being like, okay, Deku. As from here, Izuku makes his way to his room, pops on his tunes, and finally decides that he's pretty bored. So he would make his way towards a music store where Izuku would begin fiddling around with a couple of instruments, wondering if maybe picking up a hobby or two wouldn't be so bad. Izuku would make his way towards the drums as he would begin to like hit the drums a bunch of times and like see if he likes it, and he eventually realizes that he really enjoys the drums. From the guitar section, he would actually see a girl come out, and it would be Jiro. Noticing her, Izuku quickly takes note of that before looking back down as Jiro comes over to him and asks him how long he's been playing, and he would say he actually just picked it up right now, about 10 minutes ago, and she would say, that doesn't sound like it. He sounds like an intermediate already. And she would go on to say, but can I give you a tip? Being like, play it like this. As Izuku would just look at her kind of like not as much of a monotone and be like, thanks. As you know, like both that little interaction's finally done and over with, and Izuku would make his way towards the bus, you know, since we would time skip straight to the day of the USJ. And so what takes place after this is we would have everybody in the classroom just pretty much discussing like, who in the world is the strongest in the class? They all know that it's not Bakugo, though he is one of the strongest, but because he got beat by Deku and Todoroki's performances were the top of their class, so they would start to like be like, yeah, it was clearly Deku's the strongest, and someone would be like, no way, Todoroki could just freeze his sand. There's no way Izuku could defeat him. And so, you know, that's pretty much what would be taking place. Like everybody's just like trying to figure out who's the stronger of the two, right? Until finally, we would have Izuku kind of just like looking out the window and just ignoring them. As Jiro, who would actually be sitting next to him, you know, since, you know, they got unlucky with that, would look at him and be like, just ignore them. They're pretty annoying. That's what I do. Izuku would smile towards her, and Kaminari, seeing that that's the girl that he liked, would kind of begin getting kind of jealous of Deku. So he would kind of want to show off and show that he's better. Plus, it kind of helps that Kaminari has an electric quirk, meaning he could kind of turn, theoretically, the sand into glass and harden it so that Izuku can actually use his attacks. But unfortunately for Kaminari, he doesn't exactly have the firepower to do something like that. So what would take place is we would finally find our students getting off the bus, having a speech from Pro Hero 13, which, mind you, is like the most boring speech I've ever heard. Like even me watching the anime and seeing her pretty much tell the students something that everybody knows, like I was skipping through it. And that was like my first time watching the anime. So yeah, she's boring. But anyways, after that would take place, we would finally have Kurogiri appear in the center of everything. As Izuku could just sense danger coming from it, but not knowing if it was a villain or hero, he would choose to not really do anything about it. Izuku, though, would finally end up being teleported into the water section, as Izuku, using all the sand inside of the USJ, would catch himself before then looking down, like the sand is like holding him up, and seeing that there's a bunch of villains in the water. Izuku decides that it'd be kind of fun to mess with these guys. And so what Izuku would do is begin to move the ground beneath like the earth that was like kind of containing all that water, and he would begin to cause like a mini earthquake in that area by using his sand quirk. This would cause all of the villains to get like shaken up as the waves of the thing would start to like bother them. This would actually include Tsuyu and Mineta, who are currently down there. So Izuku, seeing this, would kind of be like, oh snap, and he would stop, having to jump into the water and rescue Tsuyu and Mineta. As from here, you know, they cough out some water and then they're like, thank you, Ribbit. As Mineta would be like, you almost killed me, you know.
as Deku after that would be like, shut up, and he would make his way towards the direction of Aizawa, who he could see was currently struggling, going up against a platoon of villains. Deku, seeing this and realizing that it's probably in his best interest to help, would jump in the battle, as using his sand he would hold it out as a bunch of sand would cover all of these villains, and Izuku would just pretty much keep them like immobilized, right, like they can't move. And after that would happen, Izuku turns towards Aizawa before nodding. Aizawa would nod back at him, and Deku would say, you take him, I'll take the big guy. As Aizawa will like nods as well, and they're obviously referring to Shigaraki and the Nomu, as Aizawa would rush towards the direction of Shigaraki, and Izuku uses his sand to actually hold the Nomu in place. The Nomu from here would begin to break out of it by like ripping its arm off, as it would start to regenerate, and Izuku, realizing that this thing can regenerate like that, would like get kind of excited. He would shoot the Nomu up into the air with the sand as the Nomu screeches, not being able to do a thing. Simultaneously, Aizawa would begin beating down on Shigaraki, who would have to be getting teleported out of there. So now it was Aizawa using his erasure quirk on the Nomu, as Izuku sat there and pretty much used a bunch of weird little sand pillars to attack the Nomu, eventually closing his eyes as a gigantic sand dragon looking like a straight up Leviathan would shoot towards the direction of the Nomu, chomping it in half, as like little other mini dragons would come in and eat the rest of the remains, as blood would just be pouring out of the sand, and Izuku would smile, knowing that he finally got to let loose for a bit, before asking, hey Shukaku, how was that? And Shukaku would say, I've seen better. But in reality, he was so proud of Deku in that moment, as Izuku, looking towards the direction of Shigaraki, who he knew was about to get away, he kind of just sighed as Shigaraki got teleported out of there, scratching his neck in anger, being like, it's not fair, it's not fair. And suddenly, it would be at this point that the heroes would finally arrive, specifically All Might. Eventually, cleanup would take place, and finally, we would have a 1 week time skip. This would lead us straight to the first day of UA after classes picked up after this event, and everybody from other classes would be waiting for them all outside the door. Izuku, however, would just walk by them, not really caring about who's there to see him, as Shinso would catch a glimpse into Izuku's eyes and realize that he's different from all the rest. There's something about him, an aura or something. But Deku just ignores like the fact that that purple-haired kid looked at him, and Shinso just ignores that gut feeling kind of, as finally we would have everybody make their way towards the UA Sports Festival. And then we would get Izuku making the hero speech. Izuku's both adopted parents would be watching this, realizing that their adoptive kid's definitely about to get them the big money, and they're excited because it's like, dude, they're finally gonna see what this kid's actually capable of and see if they're wasting their time or if it's good to put their hopes in this kid. As Izuku would not disappoint whatsoever. This man would proceed to shoot well, technically he doesn't disappoint in the actual like fights and stuff like that, but in the speech, these guys would get upset because Deku would just go up there and like not nervously but kind of like dryly say, everyone do our best. As from here, they would kind of like face Mac and be like, what kind of hero is he gonna be? They're mad and like they would like let out their frustrations on like the kids. But finally we would get the hero race, and the second that this would begin, Todoroki would instantly freeze the ground around every single person. As Izuku, seeing this happen, would proceed to just break out of the ice as quickly as possible, before then using his sand to travel just like Todoroki is. You guys know how like Todoroki's using the ice to like move around by like skating in the air, kind of like Frozone? That's exactly what Deku would be doing, and he would end up getting like 3rd place behind Todoroki and Bakugo, not really focused on winning this event, which means that in this timeline, Deku's not going to be having difficulty picking other people to be on his team. In fact, the people that would be on his team would be none other than Uraraka, Jiro, and also definitely not Mei Hatsume. So who else would maybe want to be on this team? Let's say Kaminari, because he wants to be close to Jiro, right? And he doesn't want Deku to take her from him. So he would kind of be there. And the second that the test would start, like the cavalry battle would start, Izuku would just use his perfect defense around them to make sure that they're able to keep the headband that they have, because Izuku can kind of guesstimate that if no one can take theirs, then they will at least qualify by entering like 10th place. And so, they kind of just pass by default because of that, as the parents are just like, what? Fight, show off what you can do. Like, we need to see something. Sure, you can defend, but come on, like they're getting upset. And finally, we would now have the 1v1 battles. It'd be at this point that Izuku would be matched up against Shinso, and Izuku would step up into the arena, just dryly looking at the direction of Shinso, as Shinso staring back at him would be like, must be nice to have been born with such a powerful quirk. Izuku would not respond, not caring, and Shinso would begin to get worried as a sweat drop would fall down his face, saying anything and everything he could at his disposal to maybe get him to say something. But because of the nature of the Izuku that we have in this timeline, Izuku doesn't say a word, simply just getting down instantly and rushing towards the direction of Shinso, as four versions of Izuku would appear behind him out of dirt or sand, technically, sorry, as Izuku would proceed to punch Shinso in the face, bend down, leading to another one jumping over his back and coming down with both of his hands clasped together, as he would hit Shinso once more in the side of his shoulder on the left side, as another one comes in elbowing Shinso, and finally the last one would come in as he kicks Shinso, but his legs would extend to 10 feet using the sand that he's made out of, as Shinso would be sent out of the arena, and people would be like, that's impressive, such a great way to use his sand quirk. Izuku Midoriya won first place in the entrance exam. They're giving him they're hyping him up and stuff like that, much like you would expect to be happening at an event. As finally after that would be over, Izuku would make his way towards the waiting area, where he would be challenged by Todoroki, who tells him that he's pretty much gonna beat him only using his ice. And Izuku, he could not care less whether he uses his ice and fire, whether he uses his ice, or whether he uses no quirk at all. Point is, he's gonna win and show everybody that he's here. Even if All Might's not gonna tell him to do it in this timeline, because he just wants to show, I'm gonna be a competent hero and I'm up next, right? So after this would start, we would pretty much get Todoroki versus Izuku, as Todoroki begins the match by shooting a gigantic geyser of ice at the direction of Deku, but Deku would block it using sand around him to pretty much protect himself, as finally he would place the sand down, seeing this gigantic thing in front of him, and realizing that he's going to be needing some crazy destructive power, Izuku would simply close his eyes. Before then a multitude of Izuku clones would appear from the ground, and everywhere Todoroki could look was just different versions of sand clones, as they would rush towards the direction of Todoroki, and he uses his eyes to destroy them all. But as that would be happening, Izuku would kind of go into the ground. By using the sand to create a drill, he would go into it, appearing right underneath Todoroki, as following this he would throw an uppercut of sand which would extend 20 feet into the air, leading Todoroki to be in the air, not being able to do anything, as finally he would create a pillar of ice in front of him to be able to stand on, as Izuku would proceed to pretty much ride a gigantic sand hawk that would come flying towards the direction of Todoroki, as it grasps him in its talons, as Izuku would jump off backwards. Before then, two sand wings would appear on his back, and Izuku, holding one hand in front of Todoroki, would pretty much cause his entire body to be covered in sand, as a bunch of sand would be all over the arena. Mind you, even the people watching would now be covered in sand, as Izuku would say, I win, yield now or I'm gonna crush you. As Todoroki, seeing that he literally can't do anything but use his fire, would finally unleash it, causing half of the sand to soften, and as he would smirk, saying, I don't have to. But Deku would just cause so much sand to come around him that he begins to suffocate him, as a minute would pass and Deku would finally let all the sand come down, as he would say, you should have quit when you had the chance. And we would just see an unconscious Todoroki who has sand everywhere, everywhere, as Izuku walks off of the arena and thinks, I wonder who I'm going to be facing in part 3. With that being said, we left off with Izuku wondering to himself, okay, who am I going to be facing off in the finals? Obviously, Izuku kind of knew who he was going to be facing off against, but he wanted to give the other students the benefit of the doubt. Regardless though, we inevitably come to the finals of the UA Sports Festival, which would be none other than Izuku versus Bakugo. And as you guys are expecting, it's kind of going to be a bit of a wash. I mean, the beginning of the battle, I'm imagining is actually not going to be that bad, but I feel like towards the end, once Izuku gets serious, the in-character version that I'm building, it's not going to be very fun for Bakugo. So, let's begin. The second that the bell would be announced, Izuku would just watch as Bakugo quickly blitzes towards him using his explosions, as finally, once he gets close enough to Deku, he would throw one explosion which quickly gets blocked by Izuku's sand, as he catapults himself over the body of Izuku, in a very, very cool maneuver, leading him to try to throw an explosion to the back of his head. But when that explosion would actually hit, the Izuku that was standing in front of him would actually turn into sand itself as it begins to crumple into the ground, and Izuku would be revealed to be actually up in the air, floating as sand would be carrying him. Izuku in this moment would be looking down on Bakugo, and Bakugo seeing this would begin to get enraged because not only was Izuku literally and metaphorically looking down on him, but Bakugo just hated that feeling. And so quickly blitzing towards his direction, he attempted to keep throwing explosions after explosion after explosion, which finally led Bakugo to unleashing his biggest explosion that he could possibly muster, which would again be blocked by a pillar of sand that would appear in front of him. Bakugo at this point would grit his teeth before then finally telling Izuku that he wouldn't be so great without that quirk. As Izuku, upon hearing this, would turn towards Bakugo and ask him how he thinks he would fare if neither of them used their quirks, and Bakugo would say that he would completely decimate him. As Izuku, turning towards Bakugo with a grin, would then say, "Alright, how about we test that theory? No quirks, no explosions, just hand-to-hand combat. How's that, Bakugo? I'll give you a chance in this battle. I'll let you show off in front of all of these people. Show them how much better than me you are, Bakugo." So Bakugo would smirk and say, "Can't believe you agreed to this, Deku. Can't wait to embarrass you in front of everybody. You're nothing without your quirk. Remember that." As he would rush in towards Izuku's direction, throwing a punch which would quickly be slipped by Izuku, who using taijutsu would throw a spinning kick right at the stomach of Bakugo, who would proceed to hold it before then getting cut with an uppercut right at his chin. It would literally cut him, right? As following this attack, Bakugo looks back up before throwing a haymaker explosion at Izuku, breaking the rules of their contest. As Izuku with his sand, he would actually go on a grasp onto the hand of Bakugo as he wouldn't be able to move it, and Izuku would wag his finger in front of him going before he then punches Bakugo square in the stomach once more, picking him up off the ground and then throwing a kick upwards which would hit Bakugo in the chin once more, leaving Izuku's foot imprinted like the dust on his foot imprinted in Bakugo's face, sending him crashing onto the other side of the arena as Bakugo would slowly get up angrily at Izuku, holding his hands together as he would say, "A peace shot." And from here, a gigantic AP shot would shoot towards the direction of Izuku, as Izuku would quickly sidestep it before then rushing back in towards Bakugo, grabbing him by his shirt and telling him to just give up. There's no way he's gonna win this fight. As Bakugo in this moment would just think to himself that he has only one thing he can do. As Bakugo, grabbing onto both of Izuku's hands, would proceed to say, "Go to hell, damn it," throwing massive explosions right at the arms of Izuku, trying to pretty much take his arms completely out of the equation, completely leave him without arms. But unfortunately for Bakugo, once again it would be revealed to be a clone, as Izuku's not dumb enough to get close to Bakugo after saying stuff like that. So after the clone would completely explode in front of Bakugo's face, Izuku using his sand would quickly grab onto the legs of Bakugo as he drags him out of the arena slowly and just holds one hand up, telling everybody that he is here. As after that would happen, we would finally get the medal portion where Izuku would get first place, Katsuki Bakugo would get second, and Todoroki would get third. This would ultimately lead us to them having a little bit of a time skip where they finally end up making their way to class. Now, because of the events that just previously happened, this would lead the League of Villains to wanting to take Bakugo for themselves and kind of be oh, we can give you power, become a villain, because he just showed off all those traits. Now in the original, obviously Bakugo was not giving into something like that, but this version of Katsuki Bakugo, which is getting completely embarrassed in front of everybody, this wasn't just a little UA fight, like the first battle they had, the training one. No. Everybody around the world saw him get humiliated, and Bakugo could not stop thinking about that. He felt so much rage, so much jealousy, and as much as he tried to get stronger and do something so he could defeat Deku, he realized he just was completely out of his league. They're on two different playing fields when it comes to their powers, and Bakugo just is gonna have to accept that. So as they would finally return back to class, everybody would end up being told to pick hero names as well as their hero agencies. Now this is where I finally get to address something that so many of you guys absolutely destroyed me in the comments of part 1. Okay, I get it.
There is a sand hero. Sorry about that. The dude was so irrelevant that I didn't even know a sand quirk existed in My Hero Academia. But just to click back on the video and go into the comment section, like, I bet you if I just scroll just for a tiny little bit, I'm gonna find a comment that says that. I hope you don't say, oh, no, that's not it. Okay, amazing sand. Okay, there. Actually, funny enough, there's a sand hero named Snatch who appeared later in the manga. He got one shot by Dabi, which sucks because bro had one of the quirks that negates Shigaraki's decay. Comment was left by Lynx is a good boy. That's crazy. But anyways, yeah, there's a hero by the name of Snatch who apparently has a sand quirk, and obviously because, you know, now I finally have to address this means that Izuku would go on to be interning with Snatch, because I mean, like, who else is he gonna go with realistically? The dude has literally a sand quirk. And does Deku have a better sand ability than Snatch? I mean, come on now, it's kind of obvious. There's levels to this stuff, you know what I mean? But anyways, eventually Izuku would make his way towards the agency, where Izuku would pretty much find himself kind of just wasting a week. He really only went there because, like, yes, he had other internship opportunities, but going to a sand hero, seeing somebody who runs his agency like that would probably be good for later. Plus, Izuku completely understands and he's gonna have opportunities to intern with other heroes whenever he wants. Plus, this guy's a top 50 hero, so it's not that bad. But anyways, he would learn a couple of things about agency running and stuff like that. And while all this would be going on the other side of the world, Ida would currently literally be getting, like, paralyzed by Stain. Because in the anime, I don't know if you guys remember, but Stain was literally gonna kill Ida for being a fake hero, even though he wasn't even a full-fledged hero. But because I don't want things to get too dark, and I also don't want UA to completely shut down for the nature of this what if, I'm just gonna be saying that Stain in this timeline kind of has a little bit of mercy for Ida, stabbing him in the back, pretty much paralyzing him, never allowing him to continue in his hero work. So after news of this would break out, Izuku would literally be training with his with Snatch, as 4 days into it, you would get a call for all the rest of the hero students to return to UA, where they would all be informed of the tragedy that happened with Tenya Ida. After all of this would be said and done, Izuku, hearing about this, would quickly set his sights on the hero killer Stain, wanting to bring him to justice. Not because he hurt Tenya Ida specifically, but what this is doing and what it stands for. While Izuku can understand trying to take out fake heroes, Ida was not a fake hero. He just had a bad day. He was overcome with revenge and he made a bad decision. But what Stain did is he took the opportunity for many civilians to be saved one day. Because yeah, was Ida going to be the greatest hero of all time? Probably not. But Ida was at least going to save 1,000 people in his hero career. And now those people are going to die. And it's all thanks to Stain and his wicked and twisted philosophy. And Deku's going to make sure that he handles that. So, as a 1 week break would take place for UA to pretty much kind of like settle things back in and the news media to finally get off of their backs, Izuku would have an entire week to track down the hero killer. And Izuku, knowing that this hero killer doesn't stay in one place for too long, would wait to see before the next hero would show up dead on the news. So another town nearby would actually end up having a hero die, and the markings of the hero killer Stain would be there, which would lead Izuku to realizing, okay, this is clearly him. So what Izuku would do is pretty much shapeshift using his sand ability. Much like he can make clones, he ends up using his sand to reshape his facial structure and make himself look like Endeavor, which would pretty much lead him to begin, or no, not Endeavor, because I feel like then he might actually get in trouble. He just makes himself seem out to be like a fake hero, like a random like D-lister hero, just like the ones that Bakugo references in the beginning of the anime. So Izuku makes himself out to look like a hero who's just kind of like out in the alleyways, and he ends up pretty much going towards a dealer, right? Where he makes himself look super sketchy and stuff like that. Stain, obviously being around and it being nighttime, would notice this. And so as Izuku was like doing like a very like what's the word I'm looking for? He's doing a very cliche, like, evil laugh, you know, but like, can't believe I get to be a hero and do all this. Suddenly, hero killer Stain would land behind him, before saying that he's the kind of hero he hates most. He's gonna be purged from this world tonight. As Izuku, turning behind him, would have, his face begin to melt off, as Stain would see that and would be like, what the? As Izuku would be standing right in front of Stain, and he would tell him he knew he'd be able to drive him out. As from here, Stain, seeing that it was nothing but a kid, would pretty much tell him to get lost, that if he's here in search of revenge, he's gonna kill him. He's not gonna cut him any slack like he did the last kid. As Izuku, from this moment, would proceed to have sand begin building up on Stain's leg, which would hold him in place, as Izuku would say,
"No, no, no, you don't understand. You're the one who's not gonna get any slack." As he would go on to crush both of Stain's legs, making him completely immobile. As from here, Izuku would pretty much slam Stain in a dumpster and just like leave him there. As Stain would just sit there completely immobilized until eventually the police would end up arriving, and Stain would end up pretty much just being taken in, with Izuku making his way back towards his hometown as quick as possible. Eventually though, after these events would take place, we would pretty much cut back to UA, where all of them would be told about the final exams that they have coming up, as well as the forest training camp, being told that if they fail these exams, they're going to be taking extra classes to catch up on their hero work and their studies. So everybody would be doing their absolute best to study up and train up and figure out what exactly they're going to be doing, as eventually rumors would even begin to spread that they're just going to be facing off against robots, but unfortunately for Class 1A, it was not robots at all. Instead, they end up facing off against their teachers, and much like in the original, all the other events go down just like in canon, which ultimately leads us to Bakugo and Izuku versus All Might. This battle would be kind of interesting due to the nature of the relationship of Bakugo and Deku. In this timeline, Bakugo, while he would try to be his normal self of like belittling Izuku and stuff like that, he knows that he can't exactly do that because for the last 2 moments, he's been completely humbled by him. They don't exactly have a positive relationship, so everything would be kind of chippy, as eventually, Bakugo pretty much just tells Izuku to stay out of his way, as he blasts off towards the direction of All Might, beginning to try to engage him in a 1v1 battle, trying to see what he can do. This would basically lead to Bakugo getting beat to a pulp, as tears would begin coming out of his eyes as he, gets up with sheer will, trying to face off against All Might, and All Might would literally begin to feel bad. Like, he doesn't want to beat on this kid like this, but he's not giving up, and there's something that's keeping him up. It's the drive to prove that he can do this, that he can hold his own against him, that he can be a #1 hero. But as every day passes and every single time that he's getting humiliated and humbled, Bakugo is just being shown the hard, cold truth that he can't be that guy, and that would haunt him. Eventually, All Might would have to restrain him using bars and knocking him out, as essentially, after Izuku sees all this, he would kind of feel bad for Bakugo, seeing that his whole life theology and his whole everything that he had pretty much stood for his entire life was just crumbling before his very eyes, and honestly, Izuku felt a little bad. So now, Izuku was about to get his get back for Bakugo. Not as much for Bakugo, but just to show that, it could be done or something like that. I don't know, just I guess it is to pay back Bakugo, but he kind of hates to admit it, right? That's the words that I was actually looking for. But anyways, essentially a gigantic sand tsunami would appear right in front of All Might, as All Might would throw a punch right at it, causing the tsunami to split right in the center. But as that happens, a gigantic beast of a monster would appear before him, as he would slam its hand right down on All Might, who narrowly manages to catch it and would begin to be crushed into the ground. But in this moment, the ground itself would begin to soften up, as it would be revealed that the ground he was standing on was sand itself. He would begin to sink into the ground as All Might would begin to get worried, realizing that he's inside of quicksand. And Izuku would walk up closer and closer to All Might, who inside of quicksand, even though he's as strong as he is, he wasn't able to do anything, because this sand was literally hugging him so tightly and also so loosely at the same time, where even if All Might tried to move and use his strength to break out, the sand would quickly soften up, leading All Might to not be able to brute force his way out of it. So as All Might would struggle more and more, Izuku would stand before All Might as he pretty much tells him to just yield already, that there's no way he's busting out of that, and if he does, he's in for a world of pain. From here, All Might would pretty much begin to smile towards the direction of Izuku before telling him he's extremely proud of his performance, telling him that he definitely went plus ultra, as Izuku in this moment would just kind of smirk, but All Might would finally crack that and be like, but I haven't gone plus ultra, as it'd be kind of a cringy but also cool scene. It would have been cool if All Might's voice actor says it, but because I said it, it was just kind of lame. But anyways, All Might eventually ends up breaking out, and Izuku would be completely stunned, as All Might would rush towards the direction of Izuku, but Izuku using his sand would grab All Might by all four of his limbs, as Izuku would say he didn't want to have to do this, and from his left hand would form a sand chainsaw, as he would begin getting closer and closer to All Might, who would break out of one of the restraints as sand would begin to get closer and closer, covering him in such a thick layer that it would look like a mountain was covering All Might, and he was just at the very tippity top. As Izuku would get closer and closer and closer to All Might, who, realizing that he literally can't escape this time no matter what he does, would pretty much just tell Izuku that he quits. As from here, Izuku would kind of stop the chainsaw from continuing to spin, as he would tell All Might that that was smart. Everybody in Class 1A would be stunned, being like, well, the only reason that happened was because All Might had those restraints on him, and everybody's just kind of lying to themselves, being like, yeah, that had to be why. Like, there's no way Izuku's stronger than All Might, but deep down inside, they all kind of knew that Izuku was really kind of that guy. So after that would happen, we would finally zoom into all of the kids on the bus ride making their way to the Forest training camp, where once there, all of them end up pretty much making their way off of the bus on top of a mountaintop, where they're like, hey, why is the camp so far away? When suddenly, Mandalay would throw each and every single one of them off the cliff, as all of them have to go through an intense 4 hours of defeating these rock monsters to finally make it to the camp. And once they would end up doing so, they would end up having a nice warm cup meal by the two of the Wild Pussycats. But anyways, after that would happen, everybody ends up enjoying their food, and we would have approximately, I want to say 4 days of inactivity happening, where like nothing really goes down. They're kind of just training and stuff like that, until eventually we would have the night where the League of Villains attacks. Their objective: A, capture Katsuki Bakugo, and B, try to kill that annoying Izuku kid. So the League of Villains with those objectives would try to do just that. And eventually we would have the moment where Koda would end up leaving the camp, as Izuku, like in the original, actually ends up following him kind of in a weird way, just because he knows that Koda lost his parents to a hero attack, and Izuku can actually relate to him. He lost his dad to a hero attack. So wanting to go over there and see what's up, he would sort of just follow behind, just kind of like giving Koda his space, knowing that when you feel this way, you don't want someone to come up to you and be like, oh, I'm sorry for your loss, or I know what it's like. Like, Izuku knows that. That's not what he wanted to hear when he was a kid. He just wanted someone to be right there, someone to just listen. That's all he wanted. And Izuku's gonna do that, but from afar. Eventually, after a couple of minutes would pass and he would see Koda sobbing, he would begin to be ready to maybe go over there and say something to him. But before he could do that, Muscular, coming out of the shadows, would make his presence known, as Muscular, going on to let out an evil grin, would proceed to say that he got lucky, that he gets to do all the killing he wants tonight, as Muscular would like have his cloak taken off by himself, as Koda, seeing Muscular, would say, it's you, you're the one who killed my parents. And Izuku, seeing that and looking towards the direction of Muscular, would begin to be enraged. He almost could see that Muscular was the exact same villain that killed his father. And after hearing those words come out of Ida's mouth, everything about Izuku's demeanor would change. Izuku, coming out of the shadows, would grab Koda with the sand before then taking him to safety, just gliding him away, as Izuku would crack his neck and say, you know, it's scum like you that I hate the most. I don't think society's gonna care much when I kill you. As from here, Muscular would begin to laugh maniacally, being like, you kill me? You must be kidding, brat. You're gonna need at least another 100 years before you could do that. As he throws a punch straight at the direction of Izuku, cracking the ground, which would then lead to Izuku looking up at him with enraged eyes. Sand would begin to cover the entirety of Muscular, as he would begin to slowly crush Muscular, who would extend his muscle fibers, growing in size, as Izuku would say, perfect. You're gonna pop like a balloon, you know that? As he would crush him, leaving Muscular's muscles entirely crushed, making it so that like he was completely taken out of the equation. And once Muscular was finally completely defenseless, Izuku would tell him that he's gonna bury him 1,000 feet underground, as Muscular in this moment would begin to scream out in fear, in complete terror, as Izuku would begin sinking him into the ground, as Muscular would be like, stop, no, wait, and then you would finally like hear the screams finally stop, as Muscular, being buried into the ground, would just sit there without any more replies. Eventually, we would skip over to the perspective of Izuku as he snapped out of it, and Shukaku would tell him, "Color me impressed, kid. I didn't think you had it in you to take things that far." As from here, Izuku would say, "Good riddance. The world's better off without someone like him in it." As he would pretty much go on a walk away from that direction, eventually running into Tokiyami and Dupli Arms, helping Tokiyami control Dark Shadow, as finally he would bump into the rest of the girls from their class. As you know, once that happens, he would end up saving Toya, not Toya, but he would end up saving Uraraka and the Frog Girl, right? Which would ultimately lead them to finally like rushing towards the direction of where Todoroki and Bakugo are, which I know it's the opposite order, but for this timeline, trust, this is how it's gonna happen. As essentially, they would end up finding out that not only was Katsuki Bakugo kidnapped, but Todoroki was as well. We begin our story in the League of Villains hideout, as Bakugo and Todoroki would both be having their restraints taken off of them, and Bakugo could finally see everything that's going on around him. Bakugo quickly goes on to say, "The hell's going on here? What are you doing here? Why am I tied up? I'm gonna kill you when I get out of this, you know." As Todoroki, to the left of him, would kind of just be silent, looking towards the direction of one particular character in the room, Dabi. It would be in this moment that Todoroki and Bakugo would begin to have a conversation with Shigaraki, and as to the conversation, I can see it going down something like this. "Hey, you, the one with the blonde hair. I've seen your potential. You seem very powerful, but it seems to me like you're always 2 steps behind that kid over there." As he would go on to point towards the screen, showing an image of Izuku Midoriya, as Bakugo from this moment would say, "Shut up, you don't know anything about me or that damn nerd." As from here, Shigaraki would go on to say, "I know you want to get stronger, I know you want to beat him, and I can help you do that. Or more specifically, I know someone who can." As Bakugo, after hearing that, would say, "And so what? What if I said yes to your offer? Are you proposing that I become some washed up villain like you, just to beat that loser? Over my dead body." As from here, Todoroki would go on to beat, sorry, my bad. As from here, Shigaraki would go on to get right in front of Bakugo and almost place his hands on his face for disrespecting him. But before he could do that, All For One through the TV would say, "Let me talk to him." And so Bakugo would be taken to a different room by Kurogiri, where he would appear directly in front of All For One. As in this moment, we would jump cut right back to Todoroki, who would pretty much just have the League of Villains talking to him, and would eventually end up with the reveal of Toya Todoroki being Dabi himself, of Dabi being Toya Todoroki. I completely botched that, but you know what I mean. It pretty much ends up culminating in this like really like cool zoom in pan motion kind of scene where Todoroki's eyes just go super wide and Dabi's just looking at him. I can just imagine like the screen going black and then like a commercial break, you know, OG 2000 style. But regardless, the screen would come back on and Todoroki would be sitting there like, "That's not true," until finally Dabi reveals that it is him and that they can get back at Dad. Remember, at this point in the story, Izuku did not care one bit about Todoroki. He wasn't sitting there going, "It's your quirk, not his." So this pretty much means that Todoroki's still on that like I hate my dad timing, like daddy issues timing, you know? So this would have led Todoroki to low-key being a bit manipulated by his brother Dabi. And after he would tell him his plans to basically get back at Endeavor, this would leave a very vulnerable Todoroki in this point of time to actually end up joining the League of Villains. As from here, he would go on to be released from his shackles, and he would go on to talk with Dabi about everything that went down, with Dabi explaining that the day that he supposedly died, he really almost did. But when he woke up, he was with the doctor who patched him up. Honestly, y'all, I kind of forgot what Dabi's like full on like backstory thing happened, so I'm not going to go too much into detail in case I butcher it. But the point is, Todoroki joins the League of Villains. And now we jump right back towards the perspective of Bakugo, who at this moment is just standing and looking right at the direction of All For One, who would just slowly begin to walk over towards him, placing his hand on his head as a red glow would come off of his hand. And Bakugo in this moment would feel power coursing through his veins like he never has before.
as Bakugo in this moment could feel his body beginning to heat up and a bunch of sweat to start coursing through his veins, as Bakugo's body starts to turn sort of red in some spots. And the best thing that I can compare it to is if you guys have seen the Iron Man 2 to 3 movie, like the villain at the end of it who could like get really hot and like destroy the Iron Man suit, something like that would happen. Now the reason that I'm giving Bakugo this quirk is because A, it will not only give him the ability to launch more powerful explosions, but now with this ability in hand, he's going to be able to do something to Izuku's sand, which is going to impact their battle a lot more than you would expect. He's going to be able to completely crystallize it, in a sense that he's going to be able to almost negate Izuku's sand attacks, at least some of them. And this would lead Bakugo to pretty much turning towards All For One and telling him that whatever it is he needs, he's in. As All For One would smile and say, "Good. Now let me show you to your new room." Bakugo from here would make his way there, and so we would now get a scene of Bakugo just kind of sitting there with a smirk, with him thinking to himself, he has no idea what he just did. As from here, we would pretty much just cut back towards the direction of the heroes, who at this moment are all wondering how they're going to recover Bakugo and Todoroki. And so the plan that they would have ended up forming in the original would still go down much like you guys would actually expect, which means that All Might and the rest of the heroes would still end up arriving at the League of Villains location, where they not only end up finding Shigaraki, Dabi, Spinner, I believe Twice was there, and Toga and stuff like that, but they also see that Todoroki's there, and he has a whole new look. His hero outfit was replaced by a villain outfit because Todoroki was 100% in on this. So this would mean that as all the heroes are lunging in trying to capture them, Todoroki's ice quirk would shoot out a glacier at them, as All Might, being the only one capable of countering this, throws a massive punch that would shatter it completely, as Todoroki and Dabi would shoot flame attacks right towards the direction of All Might, who in this moment would get charred by them, being sent flying as All Might gets right back up, only to see an ice attack coming right at him. It would be in this moment that the rest of the heroes, seeing that ice attack is actually being shot at the direction of All Might, would think that there's some other villain they didn't know about. And so they would rush back in as a massive fight would ensue, where ultimately the villains end up being apprehended. This would have meant that Endeavor would have arrived, and like let's say even Mirko was there this time, right? Because in the original she wasn't, but let's just add her because they're kind of gonna need a bit extra more firepower, because these villains were just not going down, at least not Dabi and Todoroki. But when they finally did, Dabi and Todoroki would be right next to each other, and Endeavor, arriving right there, would ask Todoroki what the heck he thinks he's doing. That to this point, this is the worst case of childhood rebellion that he's done this entire time. And Todoroki would look at him, telling him this isn't rebellion. He's trying to ruin him just like he ruined him. As Endeavor would be like, "The heck are you talking about, boy?" And Todoroki would say, "Just gas Toya over there." As from here, Endeavor's eyes would widen as he could see the look on Dabi's face, as he would say, "Hey Pops, been a while." As Endeavor, being completely shocked by this revelation, would just crumble. As all this would be happening and the shock of this news would finally hit them, All For One would end up teleporting all of them out of that situation, as we would now have All For One standing in front of all of these heroes, as a couple of Nomus would actually come out through these portals, and the Nomus would actually keep all the heroes distracted, all but All Might, as the battle between All Might would begin. And this battle would go down just like you would expect in the original. I mean, the clash back and forth, All Might saving a woman from a collapsing building, all of that goes just like you will expect. The change comes when All Might finally stopping to tell him about Shigaraki and telling him that he's really Shimura, I don't know. Bro, I be forgetting the names, okay? It's been a while since I've seen this fight. But the point is, that goes down just like in the original, until finally he would pretty much like end up creating a portal which would summon Katsuki Bakugo, and All Might would say, "You think you're gonna hold them hostage in the middle of this fight and that's gonna make you think you can beat me by holding my student hostage?" As from here, All For One would say, "I'm not holding him hostage. He's here on his own free will." And suddenly, Bakugo shoots towards the direction of All Might, throwing an explosion square to his face, as Bakugo would smirk before saying,
That's payback for last time, old man. As suddenly, All Might being sent flying and Izuku tuning into everything that's going on in the news, realizing that the heroes are literally in trouble right now, quickly jumping out of his bedroom window, would jump onto sand that's floating in the air as he would quickly fly towards the direction where the battle's currently taking place. Izuku would end up arriving as fast as possible by realizing that this sand is moving too slow. So he would create gigantic wings, like a gigantic wings on his back. Why did I just stutter to say that? I don't know. But anyway, gigantic wings on his back, making himself look like a Nephilim, right? As he flies towards the direction of where the battle's taking place, looking more like hawks, actually. That's probably a better example. But yeah, looking more like hawks, as he would finally touch down onto the ground, and Bakugo would have a evil smile, saying, finally the guy I wanted to see. As, you know, All For One would go on a nod at Bakugo, telling him that he can take him out and he'll take the symbol of peace out. As we would have a 1v1 battle, you know what I mean? Technically a 2v2, right? But, you know, they're not exactly working together or synchronizing or anything. Bakugo would turn towards the direction of Izuku, telling him that finally they're gonna even out the score. As Izuku would say he doesn't have time for this. All Might right now is about to be killed in front of them if he doesn't help out. As he would go on to say that he's not an idiot and that he knows he needs to help. As from here, Bakugo would start heating up, his body would start changing color, and Izuku seeing this would be like, what the? As this would be kind of like a Majin Vegeta type scene where he turned evil, you know what I mean? But with this all happening, Izuku turning towards Bakugo would be like, what have you done? As Izuku would put up a barrier to block this explosion, but it would turn to glass before a smaller explosion would come in, destroying it completely. And Izuku would say, are you serious right now? You'd rather fight over this petty little squabble than to help out the person that you've admired ever since you were a kid? He's our teacher, damn it! How can you be thinking about this? But Bakugo would say, shut up! You don't know what it's like. As from here, he would shoot off towards the direction of Izuku, blasting an explosion, as Izuku would guard against it by using a sand shield, and he would throw explosion after explosion after explosion, as Izuku would create about 20 sand clones of himself, which would all rush towards the direction of Bakugo, but they would be completely destroyed, as Bakugo would begin smirking and saying now they're even, but Izuku would say he cannot play with him anymore. He can't just sit here and have all these games go down while the symbol of peace is literally out there dying. And so Izuku would proceed to just say, I'm sorry, Bakugo. As suddenly he would lift up both of his hands into the air, as all the sand in the area would rise up like 100 feet higher than any buildings that you could see, as all that sand would rise up, and Bakugo would say, give me your worst, as he would charge up the biggest explosion in the My Hero Academia verse, and Izuku's sand tsunami would rush at Bakugo, just trying to crush him, as Bakugo throws the explosion, basically trying his best to stop this from happening, but it just completely sucks him into it, as the sand would pretty much drag Bakugo to the top, as Izuku would say he's sorry he had to do that. And from here, he would turn towards All For One's direction, as he would turn into a Shukaku state. His arm would change, as it would look much more like Gaara, and half of his face would turn into Shukaku. From here, Izuku would think to himself that he takes care of this guy, the villain problem will probably go down significant, as Izuku would rush All For One with an attack, and he would scratch at him. All For One would have even tried to use a barrier quirk, but he would have shattered right through it, because the strength that he was exerting right now was just overwhelming him. And now he had to face off against Shukaku amped Izuku and All Might, who eventually, with the help of Izuku, was able to land his Texas Smash, as Izuku would begin covering All For One up with sand, about to finish off the job. As suddenly, because Izuku had his guard down and Bakugo was over there unconscious, Bakugo began to get up, with his body heating up completely, as he would shoot straight towards the direction of Izuku before yelling out, "Get out of the way!" And Izuku, barely realizing that this was coming, would move out of the way, as Bakugo would blast an explosion square to the face of All For One, sending his, basically blowing up his head. As from here, Bakugo would land in front of them and say that bastard's finally dead. As Izuku, turning to Bakugo, would say, "So you finally got your head out of the clouds, huh, Katsuki?" As from here, Bakugo would say, "Shut up. I had to bide my time. What the heck was I supposed to do? Refuse a quirk that's gonna make me stronger? Not a chance." As from here, Izuku goes on to ask him when the heck he came up with that idea, and Bakugo said that he would never become a villain, but he wouldn't have minded killing him in all honesty. As from here, Izuku would say, why am I not surprised? And he would just hear Shukaku in the background going, looks like that guy's not all bad. Guess I was wrong when I wanted you to kill him right now. As from here, Izuku would say, you know what, Shukaku, you can go ahead and shut up now. You already helped me out during this battle, and as far as I'm concerned, this guy's dead. As from here, the choppers would land and they would go on a checkup on All Might, who this time doesn't actually have to retire, but and let everyone see that All Might wasn't as strong as he appears to be. And so, Deku and Bakugo would both go on the news, as it would become common knowledge that Bakugo killed this hero. Eventually, the news media outlets would be like, should he be allowed to continue being a hero? He killed a villain. And, a bunch of people are like, yes, he should. Like, this dude's a real hero. He took care of the problem. You know what I mean? Saying that that's the problem with Hero Society. And for the next week, we would just have that kind of whole trope going on. But, ladies and gentlemen, that is where What If Izuku was Gaara's reincarnation is going to be ending. I know that I'm not covering the overhaul situation, and I'm definitely not covering the rest of the League of Villains that got away, because, bro, let's keep it a buck. Izuku is way too strong for them, alright? Now, this part is going to be released as a part, and if you guys break, I don't know, let's say 2,000 likes on this video, which is just highly improbable, then I'll drop a bonus part covering those events, or maybe say the movie of this version, like you guys are watching this in the movie version, and this does extremely well, breaking 3K likes, I'll drop a bonus part for you guys to check it out, But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I love each and every single one of you guys. It has been your boy Xehther, and I am out. Peace.
Hey, you made it to the end of the video! Like it or die! That wasn't the line, Kachan! Whatever!